Range at the height of the Cold War, a general officer takes a secret U.S. Air Force MiG-23 on what promises to be the ultimate finny flight before his upcoming retirement. However, limited training in the finicky aircraft will conspire to end this flight in tragedy. In 1984, the U.S. Air Force is in its second decade of covertly flying Eastern Bloc jets on the Nellis Test and Training Range. The Red Eagles and the Red Hat test squadrons and their small stable of Soviet and Chinese aircraft operating secretly from Tonopah Test Range and Groom Lake facilities are one of the Air Force's crown jewels. Although public rumors about constant PEG and associated programs have circulated for years, access is strictly limited to the personnel required to operate and fly the jets, and a select number of line pilots who are chosen to fly against the foreign jets in training engagements. There are, of course, some senior military officers who are briefed to the program. Of course, actually flying one of the exotic jets is the ultimate feather in the cap for any experienced pilot, and when Lieutenant General Robert M. Bobby Bond makes a visit to the Groom Lake facility, otherwise known as Area 51, in early 1984, he apparently pulls some strings, and perhaps rank, for a chance to fly the MiGs as well as the YF-117 stealth fighter prototype as a kind of ultimate finny flight before his upcoming retirement. On April 26, 1984, Lieutenant General Bond takes flight over Groom Lake in a MiG-23 MS, NATO codename Flagler E. Although this is only Bond's second flight in a MiG, he is alone in the jet since the program has only managed to acquire single-seat versions of the MiGs, although there is an instructor flying chase in a T-38. Although Bond inadvertently leaves behind his slower T-38 escort, the flight is initially nominal as he heads towards Area 25 in the southwest corner of the Nevada test site at 40,000 feet as part of a supersonic run in accordance with the syllabus for this training sortie, likely aiming for upwards of Mach 2. As Bond races toward the southwest corner of the restricted airspace, he asks the ground controller, "How far until the turn?" referring to the planned turn to keep the aircraft within the confines of the range. The controller replies by directing Bond to begin a right turn, and Bond acknowledges. At this point, something goes wrong. Bond transmits a message stating that he has lost control, then says, "I gotta get out of here." Seconds later, as the aircraft goes into a roll, he ejects. As he exits the aircraft at supersonic speed, his head is yanked back and he dies instantly, falling to the ground beneath the damaged parachute, while his jet slams into the desert near Little Skull Mountain in Area 25 at an angle of 60 degrees. Bond's body and the MiG-23 wreckage are quickly recovered. However, public rumors begin to circulate about what General Bond was flying when he died, and within the Air Force, controversy emerges about whether a precious national asset has been squandered for a general's deadly joyride. As far as could be determined from the aircraft debris, there did not appear to be any structural problem, and the engine was apparently still running when the aircraft impacted the ground. It is thus likely that Bond's crash was due in part to some combination of the following peculiarities of the MiG-23. First, as Bond approached his maximum speed, at which point there was a real danger of the canopy melting or imploding, he may have been confused by the jet's apparent unwillingness to slow down. This could have been due to a feature known as a coast-down interlock, a system designed to ensure that the R-29 engine would not be catastrophically damaged by an excessively rapid reduction in power. Properly managed, a pilot intending to slow down would pull the throttle lever to idle, patiently wait for the airspeed to decay even as the engine stayed at high power. Once the airspeed decayed to a certain point, the coast-down interlock would automatically disable, allowing the engine to spool down to idle. MiG-23 pilots could also more rapidly reduce the airspeed by pitching the nose of the aircraft upward to more quickly bleed off airspeed and reach the point at which the interlock would be disabled, allowing the engine to drop to idle. However, Red Eagle pilots had also noticed that with the wings fully swept to the rear for maximum speed, the pilot's ability to control the pitch of the aircraft became increasingly limited as the aircraft approached Mach 2. With the wings back at 72 degrees, you would run out of stabilator authority to control the pitch of the nose. You just became the classic bullet. Above Mach 2, it didn't want to turn at all. Thus, if Bond had attempted to raise the nose, as an experienced pilot would have instinctively done, this effort may have been stymied, or he may have thought some malfunction was interfering with his ability to control the aircraft. Second, perhaps in conjunction with the engine and control limitations, Bond likely experienced an air intake buzz, an asymmetric compressor stall affecting only one of the aircraft's two intakes, which would cause tremendous drag and could roll the aircraft. For example, if the left intake experienced the compressor stall, the aircraft would yaw to the left, bringing the right wing forward and causing it to generate more lift, rolling the aircraft further to the left. In this situation, even applying full controls would not have stopped the roll. At this point, the only solution was to slow the aircraft. If the limited pitch authority prevented Bond from pitching the nose up, while the interlock prevented the engine from slowing to idle, the only remaining option would have been to pull the throttle to cutoff, that is, cutting fuel flow to the engine entirely, something that pilots would be loath to do and which would risk serious damage to the precious foreign-built engine. There is also a final possibility. After Bond's mishap, another pilot experienced a failure of one of the mechanisms that adjusts the intake ramps as the air-to-air variant of the MiG-23 changed airspeed. As with a compressor stall, this situation caused the aircraft to roll unexpectedly before the pilot regained control and landed safely. While highly desirable as logbook trophies, albeit ones that would be recorded using a very particular notation to protect the secrecy of the program, the MiGs were extremely difficult to maintain, in part due to the difficulty of acquiring spare parts, and each flight hour was precious. As a result of the challenging maintenance, the Soviet-built aircraft were also considered even more dangerous to fly than Western-built fighters of similar generations. Referring to the Eastern Bloc jets, a former pilot of the Red Eagle said, "Flying those aircrafts was a full-time job for people who were dedicated to studying them and learning everything about them. It was not in your interest to do it part-time." It was thus apparently abnormal for a general officer to get checked out in the MiGs, and it seems unlikely that Bond would have been allowed to train in the MiG merely by virtue of being a general officer who happened to be briefed to the program. However, Bond was the deputy commander of Air Force Systems Command, the organization that oversaw part of the test effort. Furthermore, as a staff colonel and beyond, Bond had played an important role in bringing programs like the Red Eagles and F-117 to fruition. And of course, Bond was a very experienced pilot, with 5,000 hours accumulated across a long and remarkable career. He had flown combat missions in the Korean War in the F-86, graduated from the prestigious Air Force Fighter Weapons School, and conducted test flying in the F-105. During Vietnam, Bond flew combat missions in the F-105, F-4, and A-7. Thus, Bond had the unique combination of power, credibility, and ownership in the program that allowed him to arrange this unusual checkout. However, despite Bond's extensive experience in high-performance aircraft, he likely put himself into proverbial deep water by flying the MiGs using an accelerated training syllabus. By one account, Bond skipped the full academics and instead received a more cursory introduction to the aircraft in the form of sitting in the cockpit in a hangar with an instructor kneeling alongside and explaining the MiG-23's controls, procedures, and quirks. If this account is true, it's possible that in the heat of the moment, perhaps quite literally with the canopy threatening to melt above Mach 2, Bond forgot about the engine interlock or didn't have the presence of mind to take the abnormal step of cutting off the engine when the aircraft did not respond to control inputs, and then experienced a compressor stall. Of course, it's also entirely possible that Bond's long flying career allowed him to quickly absorb the intricacies of the MiG-23, to react to the in-flight difficulties as well as could be expected given his limited exposure to the aircraft, and that he was only then overwhelmed by the, at that time, unknown intake ramp malfunction. In any case, it seems that there was surprisingly little fallout following General Bond's accident, which was investigated directly by the general in charge of the Air Force Safety Center, although general officers were subsequently prohibited from flying alone. Perhaps the biggest takeaway is that the Air Force test and training efforts using foreign-built aircraft, operated without formal training or logistical support, were always risky affairs and not something to be taken lightly or as a mere bucket list endeavor. Commenting about the perspective of the U.S. MiG pilots after General Bond's death, a Red Eagles pilot explained his mindset as I put my foot on the ladder for every sortie, tell myself that this son of a bitch will kill me today if I let it. First, thanks to Flight Sim Historical Society for the simulator footage to bring this story to life. Check out their link in the description for more info. In terms of the research for this story, it is remarkable how quickly rumors leaked after Bond's accident. As a result, and perhaps to forestall further disclosures that might reveal the then still secret F-117 effort, the Air Force apparently authorized a leak that resulted in the New York Times article only a few months after Bond's crash, in which it was acknowledged that Bond had been flying a Soviet aircraft. In the years since the Constant Peg adversary training program was declassified in 2006, multiple books have been written and more details have emerged about the General Bond's accident and many other interesting aspects of this remarkable program. In particular, I highly recommend Steve Davies' Red Eagles book. What do you think? Was General Bond's fatal accident the result of a previously unknown malfunction, or was it due to a lack of training? Was the flight a justifiable risk or an unnecessary joyride? This has been Aviation Horrors. Thanks for listening.